Well, this is Fox Sports Lab NFL. I'm joined by Jaymz Clements. We're up to week 11 in the NFL. It's been a fascinating season so far, and I think it will continue to be for the rest of the all the way through to the playoffs. Jaymz, an interesting round, week 10. A lot of field goals right at the end of the game to decide it for punters. So games went right down to the wire.
Who doesn't love a walk-off, Matty? How good are they? I mean, unless you're betting the other side, of course. I actually copped a couple of losses, I think, on my behalf too. But this is it. It was like close game central this week. We had like 8 or 9 games decided by 4 points or less. We had like, I think, 6 or 7 walk-off field goals. It's a record. But for a week that didn't have like your likes of Miami, Kansas City, and Philly, it had entertaining games up and down the slate. Even if like the teams playing were bad, it was still really fun football, right?
It certainly was, and those close finishes. A couple of things to come out of it. The 49ers and Brock Purdy, they were back. They were sharp. They gave Jacksonville a real wake-up call. And Buffalo, dare I say it, at week 11, they might not make the playoffs. Unheard of at the start of the year.
It was one of those weird ones, right? Like as soon as they sort of hit a tipping point of injuries, Buffalo, you knew it was going to be a bit of a slog because that's schedule, Matty. That's schedule. They've got the first place schedule. So coming up, the Buffalo Bills, after losing to the Broncos in that chaos ending, they now play the Jets, who beat them back in week 1, don't forget. Yep. They've got the Eagles, the Chiefs, and the Cowboys to come after that, as well as a season-ending game against Miami in the last week. Buffalo aren't making the playoffs. It's just that's how it's going to roll, I think, in my view. But you're right. The Niners, it's amazing what happens when you get, I don't know, Deebo Samuel and Trent Williams back into your team. Suddenly you look good again. So that was a really, really sort of nice moment for the Niners backers. I don't know. I'd count myself in there because I've been a big Niners believer in their 3-game losing streak. It not made me happy. But Brock Purdy was back to his best. He had the 3 touchdowns, looked really good. That Jags team is a bit of a worry too. So the AFC South feels a little bit wonky with the Jags coming off that 5-game winning streak. You sort of have these moments where you look at a couple of these teams around the NFL at the moment, Matty, and some of them are just beating up on bad teams. You got the Jags, you got Dallas. It's like, can we see some actual quality wins here down the stretch? That's all I want to see, basically.
Well, we're going to talk about a game that is all quality a little bit later on, about 5 or so minutes. But let's talk Thursday night footy. This is a fascinating one. We've talked about this AFC North division for a while. It's the Bengals and the Ravens. The Bengals 5-4, the Ravens 7-3. Both coming off those close losses that you talked about, down to the Texans by 3. I don't know how the Ravens lost to the Browns by 2. The Ravens are at home and they've got a spread of 3.5. Big game.
It really is. I think this is an absolute must-win for Cincinnati right at this point because they had this moment where they could have beaten Houston. CJ Stroud just pulled out all the straps and was awesome down the stretch in that game. Cincy, we talked about them last week about being one of the best balanced teams in the NFL. And Baltimore are much the same, right? Their defense really let them down last week. I expect a bit of a bounce back here for Baltimore to actually probably win this game at home. But the tricky part for me is I still feel like we'll see Cincy maybe cover this line because if we're going to sit around the 4.5 mark, if we've got Bengals plus 4.5, I think they can probably keep this within a field goal if they still lose. And Baltimore and the Bengals, it's a divisional rivalry. They hate each other. They don't like this. They're going to go hammer and tongs. We also have seen these sort of games have these really sort of, knock down, slug it out kind of moments. So I'd be looking at the total points to go under 46.5 as well. We've seen that hit a bunch of times, I think, in recent history as well. The Ravens, I think 10 of their last home games, 10 of the last 12 have gone under too. So big defensive slog.
Yep.
This should be an absolute cracker of a game, though, because Baltimore have got weapons on offense. They've got weapons on defense. Cincinnati's the exact sort of same. They're both going to be looking for bounce-back wins. So who can do it? I think Baltimore win it, but I'm going to go the Bengals at the line. So I'd probably look at the Bengals plus 4.5. The total points under 46.5. And I reckon look to the running backs for your anytime touchdowns, right? Joe Mixon has scored in 3 straight, and Gus Edwards for the Ravens has scored in 4 straight. So I think we're going to go for anytime touchdowns. Look for the running backs, Bengals to cover the line, and the total points to go under in what should be an awesome tussle.
All right, looking ahead to the early morning games on Monday morning, Sunday football, your multi. None of the games really stand out as being quality games, if you like, and there's some really big spreads here. So do you see those big spreads as a danger for the minus or an opportunity for the big plus?
It's a bit of a split for me. So there's a couple of big ones that I don't like, and I'm just going to steer clear of that. There's two that I absolutely love though. That's Detroit and Dallas. Detroit have covered six straight when they're favorites, and they've covered four of the last five total. They're 7-2 against the spread all season. They're playing Chicago. Chicago stink. This is an NFC North divisional matchup. I don't think it matters. Detroit are going to absolutely demolish this Chicago Bears team, who come off the mini break because they played last Thursday, but Detroit looked amazing in beating the Chargers last week. So I love the Detroit line, even if it's around that 9.5 mark. And Dallas, the same thing. They love beating up on bad teams, Matty. They absolutely love it. They love it more, more than I love Friday Frost. Simple as that, right? They're beating the Giants by 32. They're beating the Rams by 23. They're beating the Giants back in week 1 by 40. They beat the Jets by 20. They beat the Pats by 35. A 9.5-point line against Carolina does not stress me out at all for Dallas, because that offense can absolutely light up a bad defense, and that's what Carolina have. There are a couple of other ones that are pretty interesting, though. And usually I'd probably steer clear of like a Washington versus the Giants game. But this one's a pretty interesting setup, right? Where the Giants won this game back in October 14-7, but now the Giants can't score, and they've got Tommy DeVito playing quarterback. So I'm going to go Washington minus 7.5 over the Giants, Detroit minus 8.5 over Chicago, Dallas 9.5 over 9.5 over Carolina, and the last one is Jacksonville over Tennessee. You know me, Matty. I love to stay clear of the AFC South interdivisional matchups, but Tennessee can't win on the road. They just can't. They looked horrible last week.
Just disappointing, aren't they?
Whereas Jacksonville, this is the great big sort of get right spot for them. Trevor Lawrence was really bad last week. He really needs a good bounce back. Yeah. 5.5-point line there for Jacksonville. I'd go that. That's 4 favorites, but those lines are all pretty big. I feel pretty confident in all of those. There's a couple of other ones floating around on the schedule where I just want to sort of steer clear, because there are big question marks really about, like, specifically the Pittsburgh-Cleveland game. It's two really good defenses going at it. I'm not entirely sure. Arizona with Kyler Murray back. I don't want to go against CJ Stroud, but also Kyler Murray got Arizona a win last week.
He's back.
You've got the weird Green Bay game hosting the Chargers. You can never trust the Chargers. So I think those four are my favorites. But look at those big lines. It's like Miami versus the Raiders, like 12.5, and Tampa Bay, San Francisco. That's over around that 12 mark as well. It's just a little bit too rich for my blood at this point, so I'll stick with those four.
All right, let's get to Sunday night footy. This is an interesting game, and the Broncos have surprised again. They got their first win against Buffalo in 16 years. They're 4-5. They're the favourites against Minnesota, who have won their last 5. We talked about their disappointing start of the season. They've won 6 of their last 7. They're the number 1 passing team and the 5th best offense in the NFL. Minnesota have come from nowhere. Surely there's a bet here on the Vikings.
There is. There really is. I love the Josh Dobbs story. The dude literally parachutes in for the last 2 weeks as a backup. They trade him from Arizona. He lands in Minnesota, doesn't know any of his teammates' names. Doesn't matter. All he does is win games. That's what he does. Yeah. I love Josh Dobbs. It's a great story. The defense has been the thing for Minnesota, though, right? So, like, Josh Dobbs is really... He had these moments in Arizona where, like, he's good. He's a good backup. That's fine. But that Arizona team around him just stank. He goes to Minnesota. Yeah. There's a bit of quality on that defense. You've got Brian Flores as their defensive coordinator as well. He just loves blitzing the QBs. Denver, we saw it last week when they sort of snuck over the line against Buffalo. Russell Wilson has been playing really well. Like, there's no way around it. They've won, 3 straight now. Vikings have won 5 straight. This is a great matchup. I'm going to look at Cortland Sutton for an anytime touchdown. I'm going to go the Minnesota Vikings at the line. I think that's if that's like 1.5, 2.5 in their favor. I feel okay about that, because even if Denver win this, I think this is like by the skin of their teeth kind of thing. So even if I'm getting the 1.5, I'll probably take that. I'll probably look at the under as well, because Denver, look, they've had some big problems scoring, obviously. And Minnesota still, without a couple of those big receivers, it's going to be hard for them to put up a lot of numbers, I guess, on this pretty handy Denver defense. We saw Surtain absolutely shut down Stephon Diggs. His brother's tweeting about how they're going to get him out of there as well. So, yeah, I don't mind this Denver defense. This should be a really surprisingly good game.
It should be. And talk about good games, we finish off with Monday Night Footy. It is the game we've been waiting for. It's the replay of last year's Super Bowl. The Eagles at Kansas. Kansas with a spread of 3.5, 2.5, depending on where you're looking. But it should be a fascinating game. Who do you like?
I can't wait for this. And it's so hard to pick as well, right? Because you've got holes on this Philly team. We've seen that before. They're pretty unconvincing 8-1, but they're still 8-1 because they find ways to
win. They're 8-1.
And like Kansas City, all the stories been about Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce and not much else about the actual football. But Their defense is awesome.
The D's
Like,
great.
it's crazy. I think it's ranked second in the NFL at the moment, Matty. Philly's defense, as ballyhooed as it is still getting up, allowing the 18th most points per game. So if you flip it around for the offense, Philly's offense is firing. They're third. KC is 13th. So it's a really strange mix, and I love this setup.
Mm.
I like AJ Brown against the KC secondary. Flip side, I like Travis Kelce against the Philly secondary. So I'll look at them for both for anytime touchdowns. I am going to pick Philly at the line, though. I think they go into KC again, very similar to the Sunday night football game. If KC win this, I think it's by the skin of their teeth again. We saw what was it, 38-35 in the Super Bowl. The game before that they played in 2021 was really high scoring as well. So with a couple of holy defenses, I think we might see some points scored. So I think I'd probably go the over as well. But it's an awesome setup, great game. Love a Super Bowl rematch. The fact that this is, a standalone game, Monday night football on Tuesday morning our time, well, Tuesday afternoon now, is such a great setup. I love it.
No, it's a must watch, as is your tips each week, mate. We're out of time. Thank you, sir. Keep up the good work, and we'll talk about this Monday night football game next week. Let's hope it's as good as the Super Bowl from last year.
Can't wait for it, Matty. It's going to be an absolute belter.
It certainly is. That's Fox Sports Lab, NFL Week 11. It is the highlight. It's Monday Night Football. You'll see it Tuesday, but don't forget all the other games Jaymz was talking about. We'll see you next week.
Imagine what you could be buying instead. For free and confidential support, call the number on the screen or visit the website.